so long it's not true. One little woman never bargained for you. Lots of people talking, few of them know. Soul of a woman was created for
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Leslie was, okay, well, Pledge of Allegiance, roll call. We have, Keith is missing today, and Gordon is in the hospital and having his gallbladder taken out, so. Good excuse. So, but we still have a quorum here.
Okay.
So. Okay, next thing is public comment. This is anything not pertaining to, this is a specific agenda item today. So anything that's not on the agenda, which is really talking about the amendment to the marijuana facilities. Do you have anything that's not on the agenda tonight that someone would like to bring up?
Mr. Chairman,
Certainly.
there was some discussion that I overheard, and it was, I probably should have said something then, last time I heard it, it was in the wrong venue, but it's the right place now. The sawmill folks,
Yep.
okay, those people, I would direct them to the road commission only because they have, I don't know if they have plans for heavy, I'm assuming heavy trucks with logs. So there's, logging trucks have issues sometimes during the year. So I would just, if you have those people in front of you again, or if you can contact those people, they really should go just to find out how frost laws and things like that might affect their business and their business decisions.
I can answer that question for you, Brew.
Go ahead.
That's the same advice I gave him. He went to Mike Walker. Mike Walker checked it out, said he needed no culverts or anything, and then everything was fine, except for when the frost laws are out.
Right.
Because what I said to him was, if you're like a logger, and you tear up the road, you're gonna have to maintain it. Not have to, but you could be told.
Yeah, that was
you
my
can maintain
concern,
it.
is
And
they weren't
Mike's-
aware of it.
Yeah, Mike said he had no problem. I talked to him and Mr. Kent's talked to him.
Okay.
So we're covered on that.
All
I
right.
wanted to make sure.
Sorry, I didn't.
No, that's fine.
I didn't
That's a
know
good
that
question.
happened. Okay, I didn't
Very
know that
good
happened.
question.
That's all I have.
Okay. Troublemaker.
Try to avoid them running into issues.
No, that's a good comment. Okay, case permit number, I think that's applying to what we're discussing tonight, which is, this is ordinance 2022. This is the amendment to the zoning. And I just want to explain something too, is the planning commission had nothing to do with the marijuana ordinance. I mean, the board that did that, planning commission wasn't involved. They decided not to include us, they're allowed to do that. So the marijuana ordinance has been approved, it's legal. The problem with that is they tried to approve the zoning. And the two areas they excluded were, well, I guess the areas included would be easiest. It was agricultural, it was C2, what was the other one? Industrial. Industrial. What, you had your hand up? Okay.
No, I'm sorry, I'm just shuffling papers.
The two areas that were excluded were Old Town and C1. And we had quite a discussion. The board didn't know that they couldn't do the zoning, so it was sent to the planning commission to look at the zoning districts and determine what would work and what wouldn't work. And we had a pretty lively discussion. Certain members of the planning commission thought that Old Town and C1 should be included. And I think, Dan, you remember the response to that?
What I saw that was only C2 industrial and agricultural. We have a lot of area that was C1 and Old Town, which is your downtown area. And I stated that, and my exact response from Mr. Lamore was, no one will ever allow that in C1 or Old Town. Okay?
It would be too much of a public outcry.
Right, the public would not accept that. So with that being said, myself, I voted no for that proposed amendment at that time. Because it was thrown at us, we got a curveball sent to us, we didn't even have time to study it or talk with people, and that was my reason for not voting to move that forward.
And I voted no simply because I didn't have enough time to study it. This is a big deal. You could argue this a couple of different ways, and I voted no. We had one vote yes and one abstention. So the vote for the ordinance, for the zoning was denied. Now, it went to the board, and the board voted on it. And the board voted 4 against and 1 for. So it was denied a second time. So I'm trying to figure out how this happened, because there was no zoning ordinance, and I mentioned to the board, please bring it back to the planning commission and give us time to work this out. That never happened. So somewhere along the line, there was an applicant that came in asking for a marijuana establishment in a district that, even if we had approved it, it wouldn't have been allowed, which is Old Town. Permit was issued, the applicant said on the permit it was for cannabis, and was told he could go ahead. And now we find out that since we didn't have any zoning, it's not a permitted use. So we're here to basically do this all over again and say, are we gonna allow C1 and C2 and any other districts? So we have a choice to make. We have essentially, and the choice isn't, this is to get your input tonight. This isn't, we're not making a decision except to move it to the planning commission after it's posted, a couple weeks from now, to make a final decision on the zoning. We can vote to have everything open, which some townships have done. We can restrict it, or if we choose none of them, then there is no zoning for marijuana. Those are the choices.
Means then it's not an allowable use.
It's not an allowed use.
Right.
And believe me, I spent a lot of sleepless hours and talking to NEMCOG and other folks and trying to figure out, let's make sure we do this correctly. And that's what I was told. This is how we have to proceed. So this meeting is basically to come up with a preliminary recommendation. It has to be published in the paper. And then the planning commission will vote on it in, I guess, 3 weeks. Because you got 2 weeks to notice it.
Whether it moves forward, and then it's 30 days to the county.
Right. Yeah, there's a whole
And then
process.
another 8 days after it's published, yeah, so.
And then I think it goes back to the board again.
My big question is, after this was all voted down, this applicant bought a piece of property in Old Town. Someone told him that it was an allowed use, that it was okay to buy it and proceed with this. Because before you can ever even apply for a zoning permit, you have to purchase the property or be a current owner. A current owner, before, I would think that a current owner would just go in and get the zoning permit first. But in order to purchase a piece of property, so I guess my question is, someone told him that it was an approved use prior to him buying it or applying for a zoning permit. I would like to know who approved that, and why are we here?
Well, in the original agreement, that was set forth by the township was voted in, and that was 2022-05. That allowed the business in Atlanta. It also said commercial. It's a commercial business, it should be permitted by that. The only thing we really needed to do at that point was say where it couldn't be. I did have a discussion with Brian Graham, the attorney for the township. Brian said the best thing we could do is set it up whereby that we put in what is not going to be allowed as to what would be allowed, and let things stand as they were.
But if we were to contemplate that, the applicant is in Old Town C1. That was not an allowable area.
It wasn't in this, because C1 is C1. Old Town is all C1.
Right.
Okay, but,
So you really didn't need Old Town.
No, Old Town's not all C1.
Right, but
There's
I
residential in
guess-
it.
You have residential, but when Old Town was set up, Craig, Old Town was set up where the residences could become and would become C1. So anybody that bought that property that was currently residential could turn it into a commercial property, because we wanted to.
Yeah, but there's still residential existing today. So it's not like,
That's
once
not-
it's sold, it
that-
turns into
that's-
commercial.
That's not the point. The point of this is, when it sold, it could become commercial property. That's what it said. I know that because I was involved in writing it.
When it's sold, it can become commercial.
Can
Doesn't
become-
mean it automatically turns to commercial.
Okay, but, no,
Now,
it doesn't.
choose your words wisely.
Well,
my question is then, this applicant, did he approach anyone from the township to find out if this was an approved use prior to buying that property?
yeah, I don't think we're here to have an argument about.
Well, no,
this.
I'd like to know why we're here after this was all.
We're here because according to what the planning commission says, they want to change ordinance number 2022-06, which is very clear, even down to the bottom. The only thing it omits is Old Town. Which is such.
Can I get a
No,
copy of that
let
over
me give
here?
you, let me give you the answer, because I've got it right here in my hand.
It'll be easy for me to read it too.
Well, I can read it as well. I like everybody to hear it. Marijuana retailers and designated consumption establishments shall be allowed in the light commercial C1 or heavy commercial C2 zoning districts as permitted uses by right, but only after obtaining a permit pursuant to the Briley Township Commercial Marijuana Establishment Ordinance, and only when located on M32 between the boundary line of Avery Township on the east and Baker Road on the west, or M32 between State Street, M32 on the south, and East Kellyville Road on the north. I think that stipulates exactly where it was supposed to
But
be.
what I'm saying is, okay, who
Okay, let me
generated
just
this
add-
document?
let me just add
Who
something.
generated that document?
Who what?
Who generated that
The
document?
attorney.
Okay, let me just add.
I thought as a planning commission,
Correct.
aren't we supposed to have input? I think throw that away and we start from scratch. That's what we need to do.
What is that,
This
just
is
a
what
letter
we're
from the
discussing.
attorney?
I'm out.
Is that just a letter from the attorney?
Get the people that are here tonight to get some input of where, if anything,
Well,
would
it's
be
not a part of the ordinance, is it?
Wait a minute, we got conversation here, Craig, can you just wait a minute, please?
So was Old Town and C1 were excluded
Yes.
before, as
Yes.
per your exact words. So this is where I wanna get some clarification
I
here.
wanna give it to you when you
Yeah,
stop.
and let's set the scope of this.
Yeah, and can we get the actual ordinance that the board did approve, the ordinance, not the zoning amendment, but the actual ordinance,
The zoning ordinance.
the zoning ordinance?
What's wrong with that?
Well, that's the issue, that the zoning ordinance that the board approved is not, under the 2006 Zoning and Enabling Act, that's strictly the planning commission that determines that. So that came to the planning commission. The board did not have the authority to do what they did. So it went to the planning commission turned it down because we felt it excluded areas, as Dan said, that we thought it should include Old Town and C1. It excluded two areas. There was quite a discussion on it. the board voted 4-1 for denial of it also. So we're starting all over.
So, and where in this zoning ordinance here does it say for, commercial use only? This right here.
What for commercial use on this?
You said that it was in the zoning ordinance that the board passed, right?
I'm talking about 2022-05,
That's this.
yes.
Where, can you?
It says the legal Michigan business, and that's what that is. That is in fact a legal Michigan business. It doesn't have to preclude anything as to what it is, because it
But
states
this-
it at the top of the document.
Okay, but this does not change the actual zoning per the zoning districts.
Okay, you're fighting about nothing there. The next
No, I'm
document, the
trying-
next document was 2022-06. That was the one I just read from, that stated exactly where it was to be, C1, C2, and where along that
There was
route.
also a 2022-06 that we voted down at the planning commission level and at the board level.
Right.
That was a 4-1 against it at the board level.
Okay, so why are we arguing here instead of resolving this issue?
Well, what we're trying to do.
Because in order to resolve it, it shouldn't come to us without, I thought as a planning commission, we had input into amendments to zoning. Am I not correct?
Well, I've
We-
been
we
looking
had
for a
Or,
document.
or is this something that you tell us what you want in it and we have no input into it? I believe as a planning commission and as the public, this is the citizens' town, not mine, not Mr. Lemore's, not the board's. We're here to do what's in best interest of the citizens of this township.
Well, if that's the case, we'd still go by what they put on the ballot, and the majority of the people turned it
That is one
down.
of my other questions, because it was all voted down
And I
in
have
the 2020 election.
And I have a letter that I'll read in later from Lisa Miller. But essentially, just so we understand, the zoning is exclusively, for the Zoning Enabling Act, the right of the planning commission. The planning commission turned it down.
Okay.
The board turned it down. We're back to square one.
Okay,
That's where we're at.
let's get right back to square one.
Has anybody notified the people that are building over there that they may not be able to?
He's on the line right now.
Okay.
And I think he can hear this conversation just fine. February the 7th, 2022, you'll see, we were looking into the language. This is the planning commission minutes. The board is looking into marijuana language for proposed ordinance and zoning changes that will be drafted by board for inclusion into ordinance. That's what it tells you, the board would be, not the planning commission. We went to the
I
attorney.
understand, and that
We
is
went-
this ordinance
Time out,
right
will you
here.
please listen?
This is this ordinance.
Dan,
What are
you're
you-
not listening.
Clarify, is
I
this the
know.
ordinance that you're talking
Dan,
about?
I can read. You
And
wanna
I
hear
understand
this,
the
or do you
ordinance
just wanna
itself-
spout off?
Well,
Mr.
all right,
Lamore.
guys.
Okay, that's where you are.
You need to calm down, be calm.
I need to have the floor so I can explain what I want to.
I want you to clarify to the people, is this the document you are referring to right now?
What document do you have? I can't read it from here.
2022-05.
No, it's not.
That is the
No,
ordinance.
it's not.
That is the ordinance you're talking, because 2022-06, the zoning amendment, wasn't even brought in front of the
Okay.
planning commission
Let's not go
until,
there, Dan, because
May.
I've got documents here that'll blank a lot of what you're saying, and I don't want to hear it.
Well, okay, let me,
These are planning commission minutes.
okay, guys.
On March the 14th.
and I'll guarantee you, at February 7th, I was not at that meeting
Will you
because
get him
my
to
wife
stop?
and I
I have
have
the
the.
floor.
Guys, yeah, no, let's
I have the
What's
floor.
the matter? Don't you like someone actually standing up?
I want to respond
Okay, but let
and
me,
stop having an argument
let-
and you telling me what everything is.
but let me state the scope here. What we're dealing with tonight is basically, we're starting all over with a blank piece of paper. The marijuana ordinance was approved. Planning Commission has no problem with it, we weren't involved with it, it's a legal ordinance. The underlying zoning was not approved by the Planning Commission. It was rejected also by the board. So we, in the simplest fashion, Phil, what we have to do is go back and look at the districts and see what are we gonna assign to them.
I agree with that.
That's
What
it,
what I wanna get clear here
okay?
is what you guys continue to say, which isn't accurate. Okay? This is so important to what we're discussing. February the 7th, board is looking into marijuana language for proposal ordinance. Any zoning changes will be drafted by the board for inclusion into ordinance. On March the 14th, the very next meeting, it says right on here, who's present and so on and so forth. And it says, motion, where are we here? Motion by Lamore, second by Kent, to accept the February 7 minutes as presented. Well, we presented.
That was for the minutes. And I agree.
Will you continue to
Because
listen, please?
You
Just
told me
once.
that we would be notified at a later date of what
Now,
was gonna come
If I walk out
about.
of here right now, Dan, you got no meeting, so let's listen a minute. I wanna get this done tonight.
But,
It's
okay,
not gonna get done tonight with
It's,
the way you're talking right now.
hang on
okay?
guys, let's let everybody.
I want
calm-
this chair to take control of this
Let's,
meeting and
let's
not
calm
Mr.
down,
Kent.
that includes you, Phil. You can't go on with something that we haven't seen, we don't even have a copy of it.
This is your planning commission meetings, Mark,
No,
you
but
have seen it.
you're speaking from the lawyers, what you're talking about.
This is not the
But what-
lawyer,
what-
this is
what
the
you're also-
planning
what-
commission
what you're
meeting.
also-
Mark,
Yes.
he's speaking the minutes. He's reading the minutes from the planning commission.
I understand that.
We
This
understand
isn't
that.
over,
You can
Mark.
let him read the minutes.
You don't wanna hear this, I know.
What does let me ask, what are those minutes pertaining to the fact that this applicant
And
talked to a township official and said that it was all approved? Obviously,
You
it
know,
was
I'm
not.
working on this for you, Mark, but you're not listening at all, or Dan, please.
I'm listening perfectly fine.
I
I'm
just-
listening
I
to the
just-
past.
You've listened to two pieces
I'm
of
listening.
paper.
Marva, please stop.
Calm down.
She has as much right to speak
I'm
as he
just
does.
saying
I'm the
what
chair.
you're doing and calm
Well,
down.
then take control of the meeting.
I am calm, and I'm trying to take control of the
You
meeting.
are, but the others
You're not
aren't.
allowing me to speak.
Well, what I'm telling you to do is, you can discuss that, but the point we're here for is, we've got the different 10 areas or so that go with the ordinance, you know, the zoning ordinance, that's what we're here to determine. We're not trying to rehash anything here tonight.
Bull. I've heard it when the meeting first started.
Well,
As
it
a
seems like we're going back
citizen,
to the February.
Can I make a
going
statement
back
as
to
a
fact.
citizen of this township? I came here and everybody is well known to the fact that I voted no on both of those. On the board.
Absolutely, I
voted no.
recall that,
And
yes.
so I am here today because I want to not have a blame game. And Dan, it sounds like you want to do a blame game.
No.
And I think we need to get past this and get onto the subject at hand
That's
and
right.
deal with it. Because
And
I,
that's
as
my
a
question.
citizen of this township,
Right,
would
and-
like to know where it's headed. Without a blame game, without an argument, just get to the matter at hand, the agenda, and not a personal agenda of laying blame.
No,
Because at
this is not
this
it.
point,
I would
it
like,
doesn't matter who did what. It matters that you guys correct or change or fix however you need to get this matter off the table.
okay, and I'd like to just, my thoughts are this. Someone let this applicant, let him to believe that this was all approved, after you on the board also turned that down.
Well, I just-
So now we're
But I
back, but
think-
see, now it's back up in front of
And
us
I
again
see that.
tonight.
And I think that
And I don't-
whatever
it shouldn't
happened
have
was happened under a misconception of what was passed based on the entire picture. So we can't change that this has happened.
But
And it
so,
doesn't matter who. I did it. I'll take the blame for it. I'm on that board. Yep, I said, yep, that can happen because that document said from 32 east to 32 west to north to south.
but actually,
And so,
there
There's
was,
the blame.
there
Now
wasn't a
let's
document
finish the
saying that
subject.
ever. That's what I'm saying. There
Okay,
was,
so there's the blame. Now let's finish the subject.
Okay, what we're.
I take the credit
What we're
for that.
trying to do, the applicant is listening, and I wanna really kind of keep this focused, as you said. Let's focus on what we're here to do tonight, and that's, we've got a new zoning amendment. We're gonna get some input, make a recommendation, have it published of the allowable areas. Could be all, could be a few, could be none. We can make that decision tonight to go to the planning commission, and the planning commission makes that decision. It will be discussed, but what we're trying to get over tonight is just what areas do we wanna allow marijuana in, period. Period.
And I think as the applicant, I definitely would, like to say my part on this as well.
Go ahead.
Um,
Is this Jason?
It is, yeah.
Okay,
I'm
this
the
is the
one
applicant.
that purchased the building and then, filled out the application and all this, some other stuff, so. First of all, I operate other businesses in other communities, and we've had zero problems ever. We've never had a problem, we've never had theft, we've never had any crime issues, and the communities love us. And that's not just something I say, you can back, I can provide references to other community leaders and village presidents and things that will say the same thing. So when we come into town, the building that's been purchased, as most people probably know which one it is, you come into the community, you probably spend a good $250,000 renovating that building. And then once the store is open, you're gonna hire at least 8 to 10 people. You bring people into the community who are gonna spend money at that business, but then you hope that they get a tank of gas and they get lunch and everything else in the community. So it benefits the community having these businesses in a business district and not tucked off in some industrial park or something else. I'm not here to blame anyone for anything. I'm here to request that, the ordinances go through the proper channels and be updated so that we can, have a properly zoned building, open up a business and operate.
Hey, Jason, let me ask you a question. When you came in, who told you that was an allowable use for marijuana?
I spoke with several people in the township, and I'm not gonna get into naming names right here over the phone, but, several people led me to believe that, that those ordinances were changed and approved, and that building was a suitable location for what we wanted to do. I then filled out the application, purchased the building, applied for a zoning application, which clearly states retail cannabis, and that zoning application from the township was approved as well. So when I have applications and township officials and zoning applications approved for cannabis, from a business standpoint, I assume that's legitimate.
And as I said to you when we spoke, I felt that this was a mistake. Somebody at the township or the board level told you something that and again, the process that I'm used to is, and I know you said typically you don't come to planning commissions, but it should have come to the planning commission. The planning commission would have looked at it, and the first thing we would have said is this is not an allowable use. We don't have any zoning for the marijuana. It would have saved you a lot of time had the process been followed as I'm used to it. So that's why we're at where we're at.
That I'm used to is a little bit different. Like I said, I've never approached a planning commission for anything. We deal at the municipal level, and if the township says it's approved and they grant me that, the zoning permits and the applications, then, we don't have to take it in front of the board. This is the first time that I've ever had to deal with a planning commission. So, I'm not sure. I don't know how you operate, but I am here asking that hopefully we can work together and get these issues resolved, rather than work against each other.
And that's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of it, with this. And originally I had some issues with where it was going and whatnot. That was my thing. And then one of the biggest things, which if I can bring this up, I saw on this, the ordinance that was approved by the board, the actual ordinance itself, section 13, item D, just found it sort of odd that they had in there that a marijuana establishment has to donate $5,000 a year to a 5013C nonprofit organization. Seems sort of strange to me. Is that typical in your business?
That would not be typical language that you would see. There is typically language, you can charge an application fee for the initial application. You can then charge the municipality up to $5,000 annually for that license renewal. The state gets their own fee. At the end of the year, all the tax revenue that's generated goes to a giant pool with the state.
Right.
And each that allows it gets a check. I think this year was $58,000 per license per community.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I know with this township, I think, I don't, according to this, I think it was a $5,000 fee to the township. Plus then you have the $5,000 to a 5013C every year. So that's $10,000 that you have to spend just in this township. So I was curious. I thought it was strange that it was.
The attorney put that in there.
That's not something that I've seen in the other townships. But some of them do have, they want to see community involvement, community service, they want to see you, showing evidence that you're giving back to the local community each year. So stuff like that would be common.
Yeah, and I bring that up because as a builder, if I come into any municipality and they tell me, you gotta donate $5,000 every year, you're not gonna do work in that town. So.
Well, and that speaks to the controversy of this whole thing, that, I have a letter that, I'm not sure if I'll read it now, but basically saying the township voted this down 2 years ago. Why did we even go on this path? And as Evelyn said, she voted against it, but the majority of the board approved it. They made a mistake in thinking that they could do the zoning by themselves. That's fine, everybody makes mistakes. Came to the planning commission, listened, we needed more time, is what I said. Dan had his issues, which now, turn out C1 in Old Town were excluded areas, which now would include Jason's area.
Yeah, which that's what I recommended to be put into it at the time that it was brought up to us initially.
Correct.
And it was told it'll never be accepted by the community, by Mr. Lemore, and that was it.
And the planning-
that was him
Still
that
living
said.
No, hang on,
past
hang
that.
on.
What are we gonna do to resolve this?
Hang on, I wanna make sure that everybody understands how we got here, because we shouldn't be here. I mean, this guy should not have gotten a permit. So, now we're trying to correct this, not for marijuana. There was no zoning, now we're trying to correct
This isn't the first time we've been in this position either. Same thing happened when Bruno was making application for the school over there. And all of a sudden, everybody on the board, everybody on the planning commission approved it, even though his application wasn't filled out correctly.
Yeah, for a hemp operation, is that
Yeah.
it, or just, yeah.
So,
He
Okay.
wasn't-
we've got two people on this commission with over 40 years' experience. Why is this happening?
But
Because some people want power, that's why. The whole thing comes down to, gentlemen, you're yet to get.
I think what we need is for him to name names. We need to find out who give
I
him
agree.
hang
the,
on, let's,
Can I
hang on,
just have
Dave, go
something
ahead.
to say? I think we can talk about the past. It's like getting in a car wreck. If I'd have done this, if I'd have done that,
Exactly.
it would have been this way, it would have been that way. If I'd turned the wheel a little bit, let's stop all that.
Right.
Let's get on with this and
Yes.
get this thing done. And so he's happy, we're happy, and move on.
There we go.
The bottom line is, if you wanna put blame on Vanessa Werner, Ken Werner, Brittany Banks, Phil Lemore, and Evelyn White, because we're the ones who mucked it up. And now we need to get it corrected. So
That's
there
all.
you've got your blame, Dan. Now please, let's go on and figure out what you're going to do about it.
Yes.
And we can get that done.
Well,
Well, it's a process.
if we start talking about it.
And this was my question of this particular, what you brought forth here, Phil, as far as where it's going to be allowed, okay? That, I think, takes a lot of discussion, and it takes a lot of public input. Not just what someone brought to a meeting saying, this is where I want it, once again, okay? Right now, we need everybody's input of, do you want stuff in agricultural, do you want it in FR? Do you want it industrial, C2,
And that's what the
C1?
public hearing's for, so you gotta get that document done, so we can take it to the public hearing, so that we can all discuss it.
Well, and
There's one other side of this that I haven't really heard anyone sort of mention specifically. So not only do you have the right to decide which district that goes, which district stores go in or where you can grow it, you also have the right to limit it. You don't just have to open it up and say, I'm allowing unlimited licensing. You can say, we're gonna allow 2 in this district or 1 in this district. So if you're worried about your town being overrun with, stores, you do have the right to limit it to a reasonable level as well.
yeah, and I'm aware of that. I'm also aware of this, there are a number of lawsuits that come out of that too, because people.
Wouldn't that be going with spot zoning?
There's an exclusion in there, and it's letting one person
Right.
have a business, so then there's a fine line there also.
There's the other, Jason, I wanna ask you a question. Have you seen townships where they allow it anywhere? There are no,
Yeah, there are townships that have allowed it in in commercial, when you say anywhere, in any of their commercial districts it's allowed. And then there are also townships that allow it per zone, like they might allow 1 west of this street and 1 east of this street. And then there are also towns who will basically create what they call a green zone within their commercial district. They'll say, all this is commercial, but we're only gonna allow it in this new, green zone area of our commercial.
okay, so a little distinct from the main area. That makes sense.
Yeah, they might, and it could be for whatever reason, that township decides, hey, we don't want it in this corner of our commercial district because of whatever reason, we're gonna exclude that. And they create a green zone, and that's the property is in the area that they allow it. So it's really a mix of all kinds of different, zoning, depending on what works for your community. But there are a lot of options that give you, the state gives you all the flexibility to limit licensing, to allow licensing in certain areas. You can allow retail, but not allow micro businesses, or not allow transporting, that's all up to you.
Right, and I think there was a lot of work that the board did on the marijuana ordinance, and there was a lot of thought that put into it. I thought it was good. And I told Phil, this isn't about marijuana. So that's not even on the table, but what it is about is the zoning, the original zoning that came to the planning commission that we turned down September 23rd or 26th of May. There were 3 sections that were allowed for marijuana. Section 600 is agricultural, section 2 is 600 agricultural, section 3 is 1,000 heavy commercial, section 4 is 1,100 industrial. C1 and Old Town were not allowed for marijuana use. If you don't name them, you exclude them by default. I know, Phil, you explained how that works. You basically name where you want them. And at that time, Dan had an issue with it not being in C1 and being in Old Town. That's why we voted it down. And I didn't have enough information. Sorry, Lucas.
Yeah, I'm talking about, if there's a non-conforming use, why don't you go through a variance hearing and process?
That's a tough one. To get a variance on, that's a non-conforming use, that's tough to get because.
I found it easy to get.
Well, if it's a small thing, yeah, this isn't a small thing. This wasn't even in the proposed area. Had we approved this, this wasn't even in the area that was listed. So that's why we're trying to work with the applicant and trying to say, okay, how can we fix this, as Evelyn said, and do this all over again? And I appreciate Evelyn saying that, the board basically said, okay, we made a mistake, okay? We're here trying to fix this, and that's why we're here tonight.
When you have a minute.
Sure, go ahead, Vanessa.
There are a lot of vacant lands and empty wooded areas in Briley Township. If a person who wanted to get a license completely build a new building, brand new, in a secluded, I guess, area, would they have to go through zoning to get that?
Well, let's put it this way, it would have to be in one of, about a dozen different areas, so you've got R1, restricted residential, R2, general residential, A1, agricultural, which sounds like what you might be implying. We've got FR, which is forest and recreational. We've got C1, light commercial. We have OT, which is Old Town. We have C2, which is heavy, and we have I, which is industrial. So, from what you're saying, what one of those areas would apply to that kind of proposal? Sounds like agricultural.
Yeah, between agriculture and forest.
Forest recreation?
So I get, well, maybe it's something that would have to be visited in case that particular topic popped up.
Well, if we're gonna make special accommodations,
Right.
we gotta cover everyone in this township also. You know? Myself personally, I mean, if you're gonna do something, what I don't wanna see is that, this is not that I want it, but for public comment, give everyone a chance to come in and comment on this. So, R1, R2, pretty much should keep it out of those areas.
Right.
You get large pieces of agricultural, FR property, outdoor grow with security, fencing, everything else. C2 industrial, indoor growing and processing. And then C1 in Old Town, retail only. Signage restrictions, the look of the building, have some certain things that you are not gonna allow. We don't want wild colors, we want them to fit into the community, get a scheme of things. If you're gonna do anything like this, do it to where you're not excluding anyone.
Okay, most of that, Dan, is already in the ordinance that was written and passed. The secondary part of that is set by the state of Michigan, and they say exactly that. And we don't have to come forward and do any of that, because they already stated.
Well,
We've
It's
still
done
got,
already in
we've
the
still
state
got
law.
to
We
cover
don't
our
have to touch it at all.
actual amendments for
Jason,
our
am I
districts.
correct in that? The state sets that?
Well, let's stop right there, because you're getting off on a
Let's
tangent.
way off
All
again.
we're trying to do is, and I like Dan's thought process, it's productive. You know, agricultural, C1, which was not included, Old Town, which was not included, and C3. And then what about industrial?
Industrial, Old Town, yeah, you get Old Town, C1, C2, and industrial.
Right.
FR, you could do your, you know,
We don't want any sales going on in industrial. We never did.
I didn't say, I said indoor growing and processing, not sales, not retail sales.
Okay, that's always been in these documents, always,
Well-
right here.
Industrial in here was defined as marijuana growers fully enclosed building, so it was included, and we're using the same language, we're not changing the language, we're just determining where it goes.
Yeah, well, we can start that project now, please.
Right,
Well, which is this one? Let me see.
this is the original one, this is the one we turned down.
This is one we
This
turned down.
This is the new one where we're basically assigned.
Right, but we
Tonight.
turned it down, so then that was not included in industrial or C2 or agricultural when we turned it down and the board turned it down. So that made this whole thing obsolete.
But basically, and I've talked to many different people, and a lawyer, municipal lawyer, basically what we did by turning it down, and the planning commission, our board turning it down, there is no zoning, allowable zoning for marijuana,
Period, anywhere in the township.
period. So that's why we're starting from scratch, and I spent a lot of time getting my arms around this to make sure we do this the right way. And I think it's productive tonight, and what we're gonna do is come out with a proposal for a meeting that will be published for the planning commission to officially say, okay, have further discussion on this, And these are the districts that we discussed with resident input. Should we approve this? But if we were to include agricultural, light commercial, Old Town, C2, and industrial, that solves this problem.
Are you scheduling a public hearing out of this?
We're scheduling a public hearing.
Right, this is not to vote on anything tonight to, actually move, say that this is the amendment. This is, okay, to get a public hearing going, say to have these districts, or to not have it, period,
Right.
or
To get things rolling.
to get things rolling, and there's, because of the process.
But we have to have something published in the paper that says that a preliminary recommendation for a planning commission meeting would say that the planning commission is recommending these
It'd be split,
5 areas. 5 areas,
6 areas.
well, I've got agricultural, C1, Old Town, C2, industrial.
Up here,
What are we missing?
see, from here down. Only thing you wouldn't be putting it in was R1 or R2.
Oh, so you have residential then?
No,
Which one are we missing?
so you'd be from A, that's agricultural, FR, C1, Old Town, C2, and industrial. And they ought to all have different things that would be allowed. And then that way, that would lock them down, so then it
Right.
doesn't move retail stuff out. If we're gonna do it, and that's just putting it up for discussion at a public
Right,
hearing.
then we'll make the decision there.
Right,
But I guess the only issue I have is including forest and recreational district.
that ties in with, as far as outdoor grows.
Right.
Same as, there's a lot of stuff that's zoned agricultural, it's still woodland,
Yeah.
okay?
Jason, in your experience, have you seen zoning for forest and recreational districts be an allowable use?
Yeah, there are a few, there's one township that basically allows anything retail growing, any cannabis use in any of their areas except residential. So all of their agricultural or forest areas, they would allow it.
That's something I think, if we came up with something that we can move on to discuss further.
And Jason, on the permit, state, on the zoning permit, something about Calcasas, from over, they just work over in that area. From what my understanding is, I'm sure you know where Wilderness Valley Golf Course is, from Mansalona Road. From my understanding, there's a big grow operation just into Crawford County to the south of the Wilderness Valley. And that's all, I believe that's FR out in that area. And it's a big, from what I understand, it's quite a big operation out there.
Yeah, there are quite a few of them. As far as the retail, I mean, people typically choose to put retail where you're gonna have your traffic.
Well, yeah, and, yeah, I'm not talking to do retail out in those areas, I'm talking to, some of these grow facilities, whatnot. The whole thing is incorporated, it's all business, so, and if we're talking
And
about.
there are some larger outdoor and indoor grows in those type of areas throughout Antrim County. They're popping up now because they've allowed that recently.
Right.
Some of the other places, so that wouldn't be uncommon.
Right. And not that I would approve, I don't really agree with it, period, but if we've gotta open this up for discussion.
Exactly.
Instead of making an exception because of a mess up, then we need to give everyone some input into this and get the public's opinion. Do they want this here, or they don't?
And I think we're making a lot of progress, because what I see is that we can make a motion for a planning commission meeting based on an initial preliminary, non-binding recommendation of these areas: A1, FR, C1, OT, O-Town, C2, and industrial. And then at the planning commission meeting, let's decide, Do we keep them all, do we throw some out? But we've made it broad enough, but not too broad, because I think we do need to have limitations.
I thought that was the purpose of this meeting.
I thought it was as well.
No,
But
this
it
is
That's
hasn't
what
not,
the
been
agenda
published.
says.
It
no,
hasn't been published,
right.
so we're not, I mean, we have public here, yes, but according to the Zoning Enabling Act, we still have to publish it for a public hearing.
Okay.
Right.
Let me remind the planning commission that the preliminary hearing, a preliminary hearing was held on this entire document one time before, and everything went through with no issue. It's been published in the paper. It was approved by the county.
And we're not disputing that, what we're disputing is the zoning.
Whoa, time out. What I'm saying to you is the document is already written. To modify this document is very easy.
Okay, then that could,
We
that could
shouldn't
be,
be
a-
having this discussion. The discussion takes place right here, nowhere else. You can
okay,
add in Old Town, you can add in Forest, I don't
Right.
care. But C1, C2, they're already in here, okay?
all right.
I just don't want C2 and C1 to pop out in the woods somewhere. And also, and be obviously a new area, a new town, if you wanna call it, whatever you wanna call it. Yeah, C1 is C1.
then-
And you do anything else, you're spot zoning, and we don't wanna go there.
Well, and that,
So,
but that's the discussion, and believe me, I've checked and dotted the i's and crossed the t's on this process and how this goes forward.
you know,
We are just setting this up so it can be published in the paper with a broad recommendation of, and again, we're keeping this simple, we're not changing any of the language. We can do that, but that's, the next planning commission meeting is where we do that, and we do the final approval. But I just wanna get us to that point, Phil.
you guarantee me that's where we're gonna be? And Jason, because he's building the building over there.
I can't guarantee anything, but what I can guarantee you is that we need to do this process and we need to move this, get it published.
Okay,
And just,
got
I
no
mean,
problem
let's
with
keep
that.
this real simple. I mean, all we're doing is saying, we're talking tonight and this is where you guys need to say, okay, hey, I think it should be in, residential. I think it should be all over. There should be no restrictions. What we're trying to say is we've got, 6 areas, I guess, when I count it
Yeah,
up now.
there's 6 of them, and without,
Right.
that's excluding restricted residential and general residential.
Correct.
Which is R1 and
You got
R2.
3 sales areas and 3 growing areas. That's what you got.
Right. So
Well,
that,
now you've got two sales areas.
C1, C2.
No,
and-
C1,
And you added in Old Town.
no, C1 in Old Town, C2 would be indoor growth and processing facility, no retail sales.
that's my understanding, but again, we don't,
C1, C2 are sales areas.
correct. No, C1 and Old
Town
Town.
But
Sales area.
we, as the community, okay, now I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I don't want a retail facility 300 feet from my house, because it runs all the way to my house. I don't really want that. There's a lot of residential out there, probably don't want it right next to their house.
But you gotta say
You-
C2 because you got 33 north. So
Uh,
you can't exclude that road. Again, that's spot zoning, and you cannot do that. So C2 is C2. We're either gonna allow it or we're not gonna allow it. C1, we already said we're gonna allow it.
Right.
And Old Town, we
Go ahead,
said we
Danny.
want to allow it.
Wait for Mark, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can allow it and put restrictions, I mean, Jason said that. And it's not spot zoning, you got it completely wrong, Phil. You're mixing your P's and Q's, it's nothing to do with spot zoning.
Well, C2 can't, we haven't changed C2 in any way. C2 runs all the way to the area I'm speaking of.
Correct.
It's always been set for commercial. This is a
Right.
commercial area.
So what we have to decide is get these areas where, essentially, we can make this simple. The only 2 that is not up for discussion at the planning commission meeting, if we move forward tonight, is R1 and R2.
That's fine, that's what I
Yeah.
said.
Yep. Denny?
I just been listening and thinking history also. To start with, you had a vote, and the public told you one thing. And you superseded and gone past that and said, oh, we'll do what we want to.
Planning commission did not do this, let's be clear.
It's okay, I'm just saying, and
Okay.
trying to settle a
Well,
little bit as you go
when
along.
you say you,
No,
define
no,
you
it's
as-
okay, but I mean, So in turn, there is public out there that says that you don't want it. I don't understand if you're talking about R1 and something and you're putting grow or whatever in residential areas. I mean, I'm not so sure that we really understand everything. I would hope that you would have Denise, who has got some history of all the planning process. I know Phil would like to pick it up in step 5 and make step 6 and it's out the door. But I understand where you're at. You're scrapping just about everything, even though you actually have the wording that you can plug in possibly. Right. Maybe you've learned a lot in between in the process. But, alls I know of a grow operation is gonna have some odor. You know, and I'm not so sure that, we even understand all that. I haven't been around a lot of it, but
Right.
alls I know, I have talked to folks that have them in the areas that, and I know this is something to bring up at the next meeting, that they wish they knew how to get rid of them, the process.
And those are what kind
So
of
I mean, I
input
just think it
we're
all
looking for.
bears discussion,
Exactly.
whatever, to go forward with whatever is decided. But I think Denise is still the best person that you have to follow through with all the rules and regulations to make sure.
And I would agree with that, and I've talked to her extensively, just to make sure we're doing this properly, and that we understand what we're approving tonight is simply to approve to publish it in the paper, and then to take, I'm sure some of these won't survive in the meeting, or they'll be amended or adjusted, we can do that, and that's not spot zoning. So we gotta get to that point. And then we can discuss all the details at the meeting and get this thing, moving.
So let's set the date.
Well, let's make a motion and do some other things before we do anything.
Get these passed first, and then get it.
Correct.
And that's, the motion to be strictly to put this up for discussion at a publicized public hearing. That does not mean these are set in stone,
Right.
and this becomes an amendment
Right.
whatsoever.
All we're saying is.
We're not voting for that, we're voting to move for publishing date, meeting date, and go through the process.
No, we're also with, let me make sure, because believe me, I checked on this every way, upside and down. We are saying these districts will be up for discussion in the final planning commission meeting for approval, but we have to list the areas under consideration.
Mm.
And that has to be in the article.
But
Why don't you make your decision tonight? Can you publicize it, or you gotta wait till the meeting?
Once we make the decision, it gets publicized.
so then that would
Speeds it
mean,
up a little bit.
so,
Correct.
right, but then, so then that'll get, like that would get drafted into a new proposed amendment.
Correct. That would be discussed or it could be amended, we could have, agricultural with additional restrictions, and that's why I didn't wanna get into, to the point that Phil's saying, I don't wanna wordsmith this at this meeting. I just wanna get it on and get an agreed upon districts that we can get to the next meeting, and then we can fine tune this and we can change the language. It's a two-step process. Any
Set the
problems?
date.
Okay. Well, let's make a motion before we set any dates.
And so, yeah, I wanna make sure that I understand that this is not an actual vote to,
This is non-binding. This is
to
just,
approve a zoning amendment.
correct.
It's to basically draft it, and then it still is able to be edited,
Right.
added to, deleted, and then work it from there. Otherwise, then it just, so that's the option we have with that, or?
Right, so we wanna make a motion, and I'll draft the motion, but, we wanna make a motion, and again, this is new. This isn't, we're not amending the old one, we're not changing it, we're starting new. We have the language here, we can adjust that at the next meeting if there's some issues in the districts. All we're doing is making a motion, to have it published and set a public hearing date, that the following districts are under consideration for marijuana operations, and they are A1, FR, C1, OT, Old Town, C2, and Industrial. That's what we're doing tonight. So. No problem?
Use the word proposal.
Pardon me?
Use the word proposal. in that.
Well, you could use suggestion, you could, but it's, what we're doing is we're getting something published so people can say, yeah, and this is the point of this, and this is about transparency. Hey, what do you mean you're doing it in forest recreation? They're gonna read it in the paper. Then people can come to that meeting and say, hey, I don't agree to it. So we're not drafting anything other than a draft recommendation,
And to get, hopefully we get a lot more public input,
correct?
is what I'm hoping for, because, I mean, I have my thoughts about the whole thing, keep those to myself, but, if it's gonna be, if it has to be put out there, we're starting fresh, let's just put it out to everybody and they all have some input into it.
And I think we're got three here tonight. I think we got the proposal, that we need to, the motion we need to make. But let me read a letter from Lisa Merlot. And again, this is more appropriate for the next meeting, but, again, we're only dealing with the zoning. But she's saying, I'm writing in regards to the marijuana zoning ordinance that is being proposed at the special meeting tonight. I'm unable to attend tonight's meeting because I'm not in town, but would like to voice my concern and opinion yet another time. It appears some members of the township board are going to keep pushing for a recreational, recreational shop, no matter how much the residents have to say that we do not or did not want this in our community. In 2020, there was a ballot vote by residents that voted down having a marijuana facility of any type in Briley Township. A new board came on, decided with the majority of the board of 5 people who were indeed elected to represent our community, manufacturing facilities would be allowed. There has been a big push to continue to get one in our own town. I'm still looking at the legality of overturning a resident's vote with a board that did not consider the decision already made by the residents. But that being said, I'm vehemently opposed to such a facility in our small town. No matter how much, in quotes, money these facilities will bring into our town, it is not worth the risk of this quote-unquote drug, even though legal as it will be to our kids, as well as being in our town. I hope the Planning Commission is more willing to represent the desires of the residents as previously demonstrated by a ballot vote. Thank you for hearing my concern. My husband also feels otherwise. As voiced at board meetings before, being a police officer previously should bear some weight on judging whether something like this will bring more problems and benefits. And again, I read it, but we're dealing with the zoning.
So, may I
Sure.
ask a question? So, like you said, it had already been voted down. The board, whomever, I don't care who they were,
The board.
decided, we're gonna go ahead and do it, like she said.
Right.
And you guys are saying, oh, they made a mistake, so let's circumvent all of this and get it in so we can have the right verbiage?
No, and that's a good point of clarification. The board, the planning commission had nothing to do with the marijuana ordinance. In my experience, I have 2 points of view on that, or we probably should have been, another point of view. I really didn't want anything to do with it. But we were excluded. They did the work, they got it approved, a marijuana ordinance is approved.
But they did it against
But they
the
did,
vote.
but they didn't approve the zoning, because only the planning commission can do the zoning, for the zoning and
And that's the
enabling.
only thing up for discussion.
Correct,
Because the other has already passed, and
But it
it
sounds
has
like
nothing,
it
it has
wasn't
nothing to
supposed
do with the public.
Well,
It's called police action, and it's very legal.
What's a police action?
That means the police enforce it.
Enforce what?
They enforce it.
Enforce what?
The proposal of marijuana in the township. They enforce it. That's what they agreed to.
I think I
You can
might-
check with an attorney. Attorney wrote the
Yeah.
entire, two attorneys, Craig, wrote the ordinance itself two attorneys agreed to this as to be the proper language to amend our current zoning ordinance to allow the product. It's nothing more than
So
a
what,
product.
we could draw up a resolution and delete the whole thing, we could delete the ordinance too. Forbidding marijuana, just like they did back in 2019.
One of the things that I would like to
Well,
say.
we're not, hey, guys, let's,
That's what I don't know.
we got a motion on the table, we know where we're at, but let's have some discussion and then let's, you know,
One thing-
anything that's moving forward, that's what we need to know. We're not discussing marijuana or the ordinance right now.
No,
One thing that-
process of how it's being done, you don't like it, so you're going to. I mean, that's what it seems to me, and I don't care, it could be gumdrops.
Over 60 people,
It's,
over 60 people responded to the public hearing. Some for, some against. Over 60 people. That's quite a group. It wasn't without merit, it wasn't done just flippant. It was done by agreement. Not everybody's ever, in 100 years, gonna agree to everything on this earth,
of course,
ever.
but.
This
there
is
had-
something that was agreed to by a vote,
But
and it
right,
stands.
the point is that what's really key to this next meeting, the planning commission could determine that none of these areas apply. Therefore, there is no zoning, there is no marijuana. I've verified that numerous times. I want to make 100% sure what the implications, if we did nothing and said none of these areas, are we gonna put anything in, then you can't put it in anywhere. It's there, you put it everywhere, or like we're saying, we put it in some suggested areas and then people can determine. And I'm not hedging anything, I'm not promising anything, all I'm saying, that, you know, the board and the residents could say, look, we don't, like Lisa Merlette, we just don't want it. You know, so therefore, the planning commission can say it's not allowed anywhere. Dead, end of discussion, except we got a lawsuit on our hand because we've already handed out a permit
That's right.
to an applicant. And,
Can I just say one thing?
sure,
Being a board member, one of the things that I learned very quickly is, and I take issue with Dan on this, my thought is, I personally don't want it. When you sit on a board, when you sit on a commission like you guys are, your personal doesn't mean squat. You need to listen to the people of the community, period. So to even say it, to me, is offensive, because you're placed there to listen to the people.
That's
My
what I
whole
wanna
thing
do.
is I want this to get to the point that we can hear the people and hear them loudly, because since that vote was taken 2 years ago, community members have come to me and said, you know, we see it going here, we see it going there, it's not as bad as we thought it would be. So I think that we need to hear the community today and not base any decision from 2 years ago, because realistically, that vote 2 years ago was 4. There was a difference of 4 people, but overall, for the number of people who voted in that election, it was minimal, because many people didn't vote one way or another.
yeah.
So
but-
today is what matters.
Correct, but please don't use when something is voted down, don't try to marginalize it by saying it's, you know, only 4 votes. It was voted down, and that's the point.
No, I'm looking at the whole picture. So many didn't even vote because they didn't care enough to vote. So there was a difference of 4 people, and I wanna hear today. Because I know where I stand, but I also know what I hear in the
Well,
community.
still, our society is run by the majority, and that's the way it should be.
And
I
that's
don't care
what
if
I
it's
wanna
4 votes
know,
or
is it
400.
still the
It's still
majority
ruled by
of
the
no?
majority.
That's what I wanna know today, is still
And
the
you kinda
majority
contradicted
today.
yourself when you said that you're
Yeah.
to do the will of the people, and yet the will of the people was to say no, but you
No.
guys went ahead and approved the ordinance anyway.
I
No
didn't.
more
Hang on.
I didn't
I
say you
want to
personally, I'm
know-
talking to you as a
And
board.
that's why I want to know as of today. And so
Okay,
this
well, that-
public hearing is needed, so we
But
can
then why
hear
wasn't,
the
why wasn't it
community
put back
today.
on the ballot for this year?
That was a national
Okay,
or
hang on,
state thing, I
guys.
don't know.
Let's move on. Vanessa?
The vote in 2020, wasn't that to legalize the marijuana?
I thought it was to have it here.
I think it was, I'm not sure. I think
It was.
I can't remember, to be honest with you, what it was.
But Evelyn has a good point, because now we've seen a lot more, we have an ordinance, we've had a lot of discussion, we've had it rejected by the planning commission and the board, so we're doing a do-over to, as Dan and I said, and other people on the planning commission, let's do this right. Let's do this right. And now we have a lot more information, and now we're moving it to a planning commission meeting where everybody can say, hey, I don't like marijuana, right? That's fine. But, anyways, that's where we're at tonight. And we're just trying to, we're trying to be referee here, and we're trying to get something that'll work. But really it comes down, we listen to the public. We need your input. And if you don't think any of these districts are valid, or you could say, look, I don't like marijuana, don't put them in any.
And that's what that draft proposal that's getting mailed out to everybody
Well, it
is
goes, it gets
letting
published in
you-
the paper.
Yeah,
Published.
and then the public comes in and says yay, nay, yay, nay, yay, nay, on
Exactly.
your districts.
So we need
But-
All those numbers in like that, I'm not sure, I know I wouldn't, if I hadn't sat here, well, I still don't know what they mean.
Well-
Is there going to be some way that we do understand what?
Yeah, this will be published in the paper, and then the meeting, that's where we go into detail of all that. I mean, it's a valid point, you know, again,
Are you gonna vote on each one individually, like you're gonna
Yeah,
start
it's-
at art?
we're gonna basically vote on the way it works on the areas we wanted in, the ones we don't vote on are excluded automatically.
Right.
So that's, we're gonna
No, I mean,
decide.
are you gonna take on, C1, yay or nay? C2, yay or nay?
Well, that's,
And then-
the discussion is
public
gonna be,
vote.
what's the final vote? We could, in the discussion, we could say, hey, a lot of people are against C1,
Right.
let's take that out.
And you would have your answer at the
Well,
next meeting.
correct.
whether they
Tonight, what
want
you're
it.
gonna do is you're gonna get it and get it moving on.
There can be discussion about any of them, there can only be one vote, and that's at this table,
That's correct,
period, so
that's correct.
But that'll be at the next meeting.
that's fine, let's
Right,
set
but
it
you
up.
break it
So
into
you just
discussion
said it
motions for that.
doesn't matter.
I'm pardon?
I said, you just said it doesn't matter, it depends on what you
Okay,
guys
hang on
want
one
to do.
second.
So this is all
The
new.
public hearing is for the public to express their opinion. That's
Right,
exactly
but
what
your
it's for.
vote's the only one that really counts, no matter what. That's what you
That's,
just said.
it's a representative
It's always
government.
that way.
Right.
The planning commission has that. It's the
Okay,
same thing with the township board.
thank you very much.
Well, you're very welcome. Just being very
I'm not
honest with
needed
you.
here.
Okay.
Wait, none
I'm
of us
sorry,
are
what was the
needed here.
question?
None of us are needed here, because he
Yes,
has
you know
no
why
law.
you're needed here? Because you have to become involved to
Because
know
I
who's
did.
sitting.
Hang
I
on,
voted
guys,
that
talk
down.
outside,
I
we're trying to
voted
You
impose
need
down,
to
and he
be
just
in-
said his vote, their vote's the only one that
And
counts.
so
I
what you
want-
need to be involved in
It-
is
Ma'am.
be aware of who's sitting on your
Ma'am.
board.
It doesn't matter, it doesn't,
I
he
want
said
your
their votes
opinion.
are the only ones that count.
No, your
So,
vote or your,
that's what he just said.
I know, but your opinion helps
Means
me
what?
make my
I did,
decision,
I
because I
voted
care
them,
about
And I
what the
said I
community.
didn't want it in the
Okay,
city.
guys, but this
Yeah.
is the reason why we're moving it forward, to have that discussion. We're not talking about
You're-
this,
The public meeting,
right.
we're setting up a public meeting so we can all sit and redo this, hash this whole thing out again.
And what I
We gotta
just
vote on what
said,
they're talking about, to get
that
this
our-
into
But
zoning.
we did.
This is a zoning deal.
Right, and he said, but it doesn't matter because they're the only ones whose vote.
but
that
what
counts.
does
For
matter
the-
is,
for a
and we
specific-
already
This-
voted.
Okay, guys,
I'm just saying,
take the time,
This meeting
Please,
tonight
please.
is just to set this up for
Correct,
a
correct.
public hearing for the zoning.
yeah, Evelyn, would you
This is just
like
zoning.
to talk with her outside, because I think you got some
It
good
doesn't,
points.
this isn't,
Okay,
the other
I'll
debate
take
will be
one
out.
out though.
Okay.
No.
Okay, wait, Vanessa had a question. Go ahead, Vanessa.
No, that wasn't me.
Okay, who had a question? Oh, what do you have, Marva?
Yeah, well, did I understand you correctly at the public hearing, you're going to be taking votes on what areas?
No, the planning, we're gonna do discussion on the zoning districts that we will allow this in. Could be one, could be, all of them, could be none. If it's none, then the marijuana ordinance is essentially killed. Because there's no place, well,
I don't wanna say.
because there's no place you
How
can
was
put
that
it.
conveyed to you?
Was conveyed to me from Denise Klein and
No,
Nick,
no.
what?
What I mean is, at the public hearing, you're going to have people say, yes, they do, or no, they don't, and that's what you base your decision on?
No.
Okay, I'm trying to
Okay.
understand.
Okay, the people are gonna express their opinions, and we have the tough job of making a determination of, okay, these are the areas we're gonna include. We're not making that determination until after we have a public input. But this isn't a vote of the crowd, hey, you know, how many want this? It doesn't work that way, it's a representative government.
Well, that's what I thought, but that's why I'm asking, because that's what I thought I heard. Thank
Well,
you.
okay,
This is just to set up a public hearing so we can discuss whether we want dope in C1, C20, C3 million.
you got it.
That's all it is. It
You got
has
it.
nothing to do with legalizing marijuana
Right.
overnight. It's just to set up a public hearing so we can have this conversation and decide what areas of the county we want, or the township we want this in. That's all this
And
is.
tonight's whether we decide whether we even publish it in the paper and even move forward from tonight.
Right.
Enough is enough.
But, well,
It's,
we,
Public hearings,
Well,
we hear all of
yeah,
this.
okay, but I don't shut the public down, sorry, unless they're getting out of control. But I think we are at the point of I'd like a motion, to move to, arrange a special hearing. Do we have some, dates?
Can you read those off again, Mark, please?
Okay, we're gonna have a special planning commission meeting to look at the zoning in the following areas for marijuana. A1, which is agricultural, FR, which is forest and recreational, C1, which is light commercial, OT, which is Old Town, C2, which is heavy commercial, and I, which is industrial.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the motion. Let's set
I'll second that motion for the sake of.
brevity. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain from voting on that one.
What's the dates?
Well, that's what we have to see, what's gonna work for, well, we have to publish it for 2 weeks, so we can't do it anything. 1 week?
Yes, sir.
I had 15 days is what,
15 days is the waiting period.
yeah.
Since it's gonna go to that, then, on your calendars.
Where's the calendar?
When is
Okay.
when's the soonest they can publish it in the paper, and then what everybody's schedule is once that 15-day period would be up?
Yeah.
Hopefully it's the same time as your regular meeting.
That's right.
Well, do we really wanna have, because we've already got another special meeting on the 24th.
I don't wanna mix them up.
We
I
can't
wanna
mix them up.
You don't wanna get them two together, do you?
Nope.
No,
We'll be here to midnight.
I mean, if it got in this week and that one, we'd have to be like week of the 31st. 31st.
I'm doubtful they'll get it, it won't get in this week,
Right.
Publishing for this next paper is already probably started.
Well, let's do this, rather than send a date now that we may have to change, let's, date to be determined, and it should be, we're gonna shoot for the next 2 weeks at a special meeting.
Once
And then
we
we'll
see it
set
in the
the date.
paper, then after that, you can go.
But we've gotta base it, when we put it in the paper, figure out when it could be published and figure it out, and then you would have to get a hold of everyone. We set a date accordingly, and,
Does it have to be in the paper the date that you're gonna vote on it?
no, 15 days prior to the meeting, so the meeting could be could be after it, even if it's, but there's no set time and frame and how,
Right.
I mean, as long as it's not months later, but as long as it's
If we get
published.
this thing in, Mark, if we get it in on the 7th, or before the 7th, it'll come out on the 12th, it'll be up for publication. To do it, well, let's see here. End by 7, end by the 7th. 15 days from the 12th to put it on Thursday, the 27th.
Okay, let me check, let's do that tentatively, let me check my schedule. 'Cause a lot of times I'm downstate on Thursdays and Fridays. So you have tentatively the 27th.
That would be the earliest date, from that point, after the 27th, you could schedule a meeting sometime after the 27th.
Well, it
Or
says
the
15 days
27th.
is what it says. It doesn't
So yeah,
say
that would be the
after.
15th day.
It's pretty strict too.
So that's on a Friday.
15 days.
We need to be into the following week. Nobody's getting, we're not gonna get public here on a Friday night.
It's not a Friday, it's a Thursday, Thursday, the 27th.
Right, but that would be the 15th day.
I think I'd rather, I feel more comfortable doing it on a Monday. It's, we usually meet people are
I would
expecting
think
meetings.
about that.
So then we get the 31st.
Let parents get the training.
Right, we don't want
That's
the
a good idea.
You're right,
Oh.
yep. So then we'd be looking at the 7th would be the best day,
Election,
November 7th?
November 7th.
pretty close election day, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the day before election.
Let's